Coming up on The Wrap, on balance, has Barack Obama been bad or good for Black Americans? The fallout continues over the truly gross comments a cable news anchor made about former Governor Sarah Palin. And where is America headed relative to the hotly disputed issue of gay marriage? I'm Warren Williams. Analysis and commentary on those and other stories is just ahead on The Wrap. Hello and welcome to The Wrap, a review of some of the past week's most important, intriguing, strange, and inspirational news happenings. Up front in this edition, a simple question. Would African Americans be better off without Barack Obama as president? That's what Tea Party activist Kevin Jackson believes. Jackson, himself a black man, recently wrote a blog post which has caused a bit of buzz. It was entitled, "America Needs a White Republican President." Much of the post was, I felt, nonsense. However, the general topic was certainly thought-provoking, especially when making it race-specific. Could the many problems still plaguing the nation's black community be better addressed with a white person in the Oval Office?
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President. All the best wishes.
It began on a cold January day in 2009 with high hopes that change for the better was coming. But after nearly 5 years in office, some of the more pressing problems in the black community have not improved under Barack Obama.
The country's back to pretty much where it was when this president started. White people in this country are doing a bit better. Black folks are doing a full point worse.
The current unemployment rate for blacks is slightly higher now than it was in January 2009 when Mr. Obama became president. For blacks with a college degree, their jobless rate has doubled since 2007. Median family income for black Americans has fallen 10% during the Obama years. And more troubling, the net worth of the average African American household is now 22 times less than the average white household. The wealth gap between blacks and whites was 20 times greater when George W. Bush was president.
Take off your bedroom slippers. Put on your marching shoes. Shake it off. Stop complaining. Stop grumbling. Stop crying. We are going to press on. We've got work to do.
We have got 42% of our black children living in poverty. 22% we talked about before. People living in poverty. They have a right to cry. They have a right to have legitimate grievances. So I think the president ought to apologize. I think he ought to ask for our forgiveness.
In education, the high school graduation rate for black males, a key indicator of future economic success, has risen during the past decade, but most of that happened during the Bush presidency. Under Mr. Obama, the graduation rate of black men has continued to lag far behind that of whites. In many of the nation's major cities, like Detroit, the current black graduation rate is less than 30%.
Latinos asking them for something and they got something. Gay and lesbian said don't ask, don't tell, changed it. Jewish brothers and sisters said deal with Israel, deal with it. All of those are specific entities. Why is it when it comes to Negroes? Why is it when it comes to black folk? All of a sudden we are persona non grata. I tell you, Mr. Obama, to deal with the black agenda is what every president before you had to do.
Under President Ronald Reagan, black-owned business income rose nearly 50%, and the black middle class expanded by a third. During the Obama presidency, the reverse has happened. Black business income down and the black middle class shrinking. The black incarceration rate is essentially unchanged during the Obama presidency. While George Bush was in office, the imprisonment rate for black men fell nearly 10%. Recent surveys indicate race relations have worsened a bit since Obama became president. On issues of race, President Obama has been criticized as being somewhat tepid, not aggressive or proactive enough.
Many African Americans would love to see President Obama talk more about their communities specifically, talk about their needs specifically, and be engaged in their immediate communities.
When he visited Gorée Island in Senegal, once a prime port for exporting African slaves to America, Mr. Obama simply called the visit a powerful moment.
To be able to visit this site, I think gives me even greater motivation in terms of the defense of human rights around the world.
10 years earlier, George Bush went to Gorée Island to deliver a speech denouncing slavery in the strongest possible terms.
At this place, liberty and life were stolen and sold. One of the largest migrations of history was also one of the greatest crimes of history. A republic founded on equality for all became a prison for millions.
Many doubt that Obama would have been able to push through Congress measures like civil rights and voting rights, which President Lyndon Johnson was able to do, or that Mr. Obama would have been as aggressive as LBJ in combating groups like the Ku Klux Klan.
So if Klansmen hear my voice today, let it be both an appeal and a warning to get out of the Ku Klux Klan now and return to a decent society before it is too late.
It's entirely possible that racism may be playing a role in preventing Barack Obama from doing more to address problems which disproportionately impact black Americans. The level of vitriol and disrespect toward President Obama seems unprecedented in the nation's history. He was publicly called a liar by South Carolina Representative Joe Wilson during a joint address to Congress.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally. It's not true.
And since the day he was first inaugurated, white conservatives have made a conscious effort to vitiate, which is to make ineffective, the Obama presidency.
I know what his politics are. I know what his plans are, as he has stated them. I don't want them to succeed. I hope he fails.
And yet, despite the obstructionism and the vitriol, President Obama has an impressive list of accomplishments, from staving off an economic meltdown with an $800 billion stimulus package, to killing Osama bin Laden, to enacting credit card reforms benefiting all American consumers, to helping to rescue the U.S. auto industry.
8 minutes worth of work.
It may be unfair, but it's mostly true. America is a what have you done for me lately kind of place. And lately, Mr. Obama has taken a major hit in terms of good public opinion. The rollout of his signature accomplishment, reform of the nation's healthcare system, has been just this side of a disaster. About 2 months after it went online, the website, which Obamacare was supposed to revolve around, is still not working right. And a promise the president made again and again about folks being able to keep their old health care plans has turned out to be not true. It was the presidential equivalent of going to the woodshed for punishment. The president going before the cameras to admit the rollout of his health care program has been a flop.
That's on me. I mean, we fumbled the rollout on this health care law.
And if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Obama had to admit he was wrong about something he told repeatedly to the American people.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. Period. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan. If you like your health care plan, you can keep your health care plan.
Well, that wasn't the truth. Thousands of Americans, like this woman in Colorado, have found their health care plans canceled by their insurance company.
It was probably about 2 months ago I got the letters. I was upset.
Individual
I
market.
was shocked.
I completely get how upsetting this can be for a lot of Americans, particularly after assurances they heard from me that if they had a plan that they liked, they could keep it.
Republicans and conservative commentators have been having a field day, with one suggesting the president may be guilty of malpractice.
The issue here is president as doctor-in-chief, president as our spiritual advisor in some ways, president as our model, president as our lawyer, president as someone that we need to trust. Did he provide all the facts, or did he not tell the truth? And if he didn't tell the truth, it's a form of governmental malpractice because there's a lack of informed consent by which people can judge the risks and the benefits of any...
On a lighter note, former President George Bush kind of found himself dragged into the Obamacare mess.
When the president had that heart scare, how scary was that?
It was scary.
Yeah.
It was very scary.
Yeah.
But
I wasn't that scared.
Was it, you had Obamacare?
In a makeshift effort to fix things, the president announced that folks can keep their current insurance policies for up to one more year. Probably because of the healthcare program mess, the president's approval rating is now in free fall. In the latest polling from Gallup and Rasmussen reports, only 41% of Americans like the job he's doing, 54% don't. The difference between those folks who strongly approve of the president's job performance, 20%, and those who strongly disapprove, 43%, called the approval index, is minus 23. That's the lowest of his presidency. By comparison, for the month after their re-election, Mr. Obama is doing better than George W. Bush and Richard Nixon. Presidents Johnson and Reagan are tied at the top of the public approval ratings for this point in their presidencies. A state lawmaker in Nevada has caused himself a lot of grief by saying he'd vote to reinstitute slavery if that's what his constituents wanted. This video recently surfaced from a Nevada GOP gathering back in August. In it, Republican Assemblyman Jim Wheeler said with some reluctance he'd vote to bring back slavery if that was the will of the people he represents.
I said, yeah, I would. But if that's what they want, I'd have to hold my nose, I'd have to bite my tongue, and they'd probably have to hold a gun to my head.
Condemnation of Wheeler's comments has been nonpartisan, coming from Republicans and Democrats in Nevada and across the nation. Something which, frankly, I don't completely understand. The fact is, ours is a representative democracy, in theory, with lawmakers carrying out the will of the folks who elected them. You know that whole thing about the consent of the governed. Well, as if right on cue, former Alaska governor and Republican vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin made news with her own reference to slavery. It happened recently during a conservative fundraiser in the state of Iowa. Palin compared the current federal debt to America's long ago peculiar institution.
Free stuff today is being paid for by taking money from our children and borrowing from China. This isn't racist, but it's going to be like slavery when that note is due, right? We are going to be beholden to a foreign master.
Governor Palin's rather ridiculous comparison prompted a much more outrageous response from cable news anchor Martin Bashir. In fact, I'd call it possibly the most disgusting comment ever made on network television. A few days after Palin's slavery remarks, Martin Bashir ended his daily program on MSNBC with a special commentary about the former Alaska governor.
Given her well-established reputation as a world-class idiot, it's hardly surprising that she should choose to mention slavery in a way that is abominable to anyone who knows anything about its barbaric history. So here's an example.
He then told a story about the diary of an 18th century slave master named Thomas Thistlewood, who wrote that he punished some of his slaves by having other slaves defecate in their mouths. Bashir suggested Palin ought to receive the same treatment.
When Mrs. Palin invokes slavery, she doesn't just prove her rank ignorance. She confirms that if anyone truly qualified for a dose of discipline from Thomas Thistlewood, then she would be the outstanding candidate.
3 days later, a subdued-looking Bashir was back on air with an apology.
My words were wholly unacceptable. They were neither accurate nor fair. They were unworthy of anyone who would claim to have an interest in politics.
Bashir's mea culpa notwithstanding, many, including yours truly, consider it an outrage that he wasn't kicked to the curb, fired by MSNBC.
It is amazing to me, that he said it. I'm glad he apologized, but that MSNBC hasn't done anything about this, and I can't quite figure it out.
It would seem, with the apparent lack of any punishment for Bashir, the cable news outlet is guilty of an appalling double standard. The network's Ed Schultz, whose daily show now follows Bashir's, was suspended for a week for his comments about conservative radio and TV talker Laura Ingraham.
President Obama is going to be visiting Joplin, Missouri on Sunday. But you know what they're talking about? Like this right-wing slut, what's her name, Laura Ingraham? Yeah, she's a talk slut.
The network gave talk show host Don Imus the boot in 2007 for his remarks about the Rutgers University women's basketball team.
That's some rough girls from Rutgers, man. They got tattoos and some hardcore hoes. That's some nappy-headed hoes there, I'm going to tell you that.
I'm Mrs.
Hyper-partisanship, incivility, and crude commentary bordering on the vile and evil seems more the rule than the exception these days on TV and talk radio. Rush Limbaugh lost millions of dollars in commercial sponsorship money for demeaning a law school student on his syndicated radio program. Sandra Fluker had just finished testifying before Congress in support of contraceptive coverage under Obamacare.
What does it say about the college co-ed Susan Fluke, who goes before a congressional committee and essentially says that she must be paid to have sex? What does that make her? It makes her a slut, right? Makes her a prostitute. She wants to be paid to have sex.
Conservative religious mouthpiece, the late Jerry Falwell, sparked outrage when he went on TV 2 days after the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon.
What we saw on Tuesday, as terrible as it is, could be minuscule if in fact God continues to lift the curtain and allow the enemies of America to give us probably what we deserve.
MSNBC's lack of public action against Martin Bashir seems all the more puzzling, given the network's firing last week of Alec Baldwin. The embattled actor had his new talk show on MSNBC canceled after a recent run-in with a paparazzi-type photographer. He grabbed the man and screamed obscene gay slurs at him. The MSNBC brass has been very conspicuous by its silence on Bashir's vile commentary about Sarah Palin, only issuing a brief statement through its PR office saying the Bashir incident was being handled internally. Stay tuned, because I have a feeling there's more to come on Mr. Bashir. Well, it's time for a break, but we're just getting warmed up here on The Wrap. When we come back, we'll have an update on that devastating typhoon in the Philippines and check out the tug-of-war underway over the nickname of Washington, D.C.'s pro football team. Also, we're going to get up close and very personal with the controversy raging over gay marriage. This week in history for the period November 9th through the 16th. It's known by many as the prelude to the Holocaust. Gangs of Nazis going wild, attacking and destroying thousands of Jewish businesses and synagogues across Germany. The two-day spree of violence and mayhem would come to be known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. It was the crowning event of a week-long salute to veterans of the Vietnam War, the official dedication of the Wall, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in the nation's capital. On the simple V-shaped black granite wall are inscribed the names of the nearly 58,000 American servicemen and women killed during Vietnam.
And order.
This week in 1921, the most hallowed of the graves at Arlington National Cemetery was formally dedicated, the Tomb of the Unknowns. Under permanent guard by special military sentinels, the tomb holds the remains of unidentified soldiers from World Wars I and II, Korea, and Vietnam. It bears the inscription, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." It happened just after the sun was setting, the biggest power failure in U.S. history. Known as the Great Northeast Blackout, it put about 30 million people in 8 states and the Canadian provinces of Ontario and Quebec in the dark for 13 hours. The outage trapped nearly 1 million people in subways and elevators in New York City. And in 1969, this week saw the premiere of Sesame Street on public television stations across the nation. The pioneering TV show has contributed to the early education of tens of millions of children. Airing in more than 120 countries, it's the most watched kids' TV program in the world. It is likely the most divisive issue of our times. Gay marriage is now legal or about to become legal in 16 states and the District of Columbia. And though it's gaining in support, or at least acceptance, there is still significant and seemingly entrenched opposition to same-sex marriage.
Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1 passes final reading. Madam Clerk.
Hawaii has become the 15th state to say aloha to gay marriage. Same-sex weddings will begin there on December 2nd. Quite a turnaround for our 50th state, which just 15 years ago became the first state to pass a constitutional amendment against gay marriage. There's no question public support for marriage equality is on the rise.
I hope that we honor each other's differences and celebrate the life that we have together in Hawaii, irrespective of the diverse views we hold on this subject.
According to Gallup opinion polls, only 27% of Americans favored same-sex marriage in March of 1996. 10 years later, approval was up to 39%. In May of 2010, the number was 44%. And in July of this year, a clear majority, 54% of Americans, supported marriage equality for gays and lesbians.
Thank you for making me a second-class citizen. No. You're a second-class.
Opposition to same-sex marriage is mostly based on religious grounds, with the 3 major religions in the U.S., Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all relying on Scripture as the basis for their view of same-sex relationships as wrong.
We feel that suddenly the whole LGBT agenda is a rebellion against God.
I read the Scripture. That's what I believe, that the Scripture condemns it or says it's a sin.
Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13. If a man also lie with mankind as he lied with a woman, they have committed an abomination.
Some in the clergy believe that while the Scriptures are infallible, man's interpretation of them often is not.
People have misused the Bible from the beginning of time to support bloody crusades and terrible inquisitions, to support slavery and apartheid and segregation, to support the second-class citizenship of women.
Around the world, views of homosexuality vary greatly. In 4 countries, Canada, the Netherlands, Spain, and Belgium, same-sex marriage is completely legal. In 76 nations, being a homosexual is against the law. And in 7 countries in the Middle East and Africa, homosexuality is punishable by death. In the African nation of Uganda, there's a growing movement led by Christian pastor Martin Sempa to make homosexuality there a capital crime.
So I've done research. This is what they do. Number one, you can see a man here having sucked the other person's and the other person is poo-pooing, and this one is eating the poo-poo all over the place. Tell me, when you have a law against homosexuality, do you say except eating poo-poo?
Pope Francis, the leader of the world's 1.3 billion Catholics, raised some eyebrows a few months back by saying that proclaiming the saving grace and love of Christ is more important than constantly speaking out on moral issues like gay marriage.
The Pope saying, quote, "If someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge?"
The Nobel Peace Prize winner, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, also favors extending God's love to the gay community rather than talking about God's scorn.
I can't, from the life of me, imagine that God would say,
I am going to punish you because you are black. I punish you because you are homosexual. You ought to have been heterosexual.
One of the central questions in the debate over gay marriage and acceptance of homosexuality in general is same-sex attraction a matter of nature or nurture? Does God make folks gay, or do they choose homosexuality?
Scott and I are gay. We were gay from the... God made us gay. We were born gay. No one can tell us that's not true.
It's a choice you make. It's a sinful choice.
Did you make a choice to be heterosexual?
I don't think I had to make a choice to be heterosexual. I think that's a natural thing.
Wait a minute. In other words, one is a choice and one is not.
Yeah.
While scientists have yet to find the smoking gun, a gay gene, a growing number of them say they share the same view, that same-sex orientation is shaped for most gay people at a very early age through complex interactions of biological, psychological, and social factors.
Owing to a few popular studies conducted in the past 20 years, the leading thought is that homosexuality is genetic. It's something you inherit. Although pinpointing a specific gene has been very tricky business.
President Obama, apparently like many other Americans, had a change of heart and mind about gay marriage, announcing in May of 2012 that he had evolved on the issue and finally supported same-sex marriage.
At a certain point, I've just concluded that for me personally, it is important for me to go ahead and affirm that I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
The U.S. military has allowed openly gay service since September 2011, when the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was rescinded. And since earlier this year, the military has extended the same benefits to married gay couples that traditional married service people have enjoyed. With gay marriage being made legal in New York State, the West Point Military Academy, located in upstate New York, has begun playing host to gay wedding ceremonies. Coming up a bit later in the commentary segment, My 2 Cents. I'll offer my own opinion on same-sex marriage. And I'll warn you ahead of time, it's likely to tick off folks on both sides of the issue. Well, for two parents in Iowa, it was a nightmare come true. An argument with their teenage son over cigarettes ended with the young man being shot dead by police. According to family members, 19-year-old Tyler Comstock got into an argument with his father because the dad refused to buy him a pack of smokes. Tyler then stormed out of the house, jumped into his dad's work truck, and sped off. The father reported the truck stolen to police, and a high-speed chase ensued. Tyler rammed the truck into a police car, then drove to the campus of Iowa State University, where the truck finally came to a stop after being surrounded by police. He ignored demands to get out of the truck. Then, one of the cops opened fire.
What you got on him, 88? Hey, 88, we got shots fired. He's trying to ram us again. Shots fired.
The teenager, who was unarmed, was hit and killed by 2 bullets. Tyler's mom and dad are demanding to know in a formal report why the cops felt they had to shoot him. Police say he put lives in danger, fleeing in the truck and driving recklessly across the Iowa State campus. It was Shakespeare who once wrote that a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. Right now in the nation's capital, there's quite a stink being made about the name of Washington's pro football team.
Let's go! Let's get it! Dominate on 3! 1, 2, 3, dominate!
It's a subject at least as hot in the nation's capital as Obamacare. Should the Washington Redskins drop their nickname?
This is an offensive name, and that there's a lot of people in the world that find it that way, and that we have an obligation to change it.
No name change ever.
It fits the team. That's the name for the team, the Washington Redskins.
This is the one that is by far the most offensive to Native Americans.
Correct.
This is the one that is the slur. This is the one that they believe is akin to the N-word.
If it were really that upsetting to the fans, nobody would be going to FedEx Stadium. But FedEx Stadium is sold out every week.
Despite a growing chorus of folks urging him to change it, Redskins owner Dan Snyder is standing firm. The nickname will remain.
The Washington Redskins owner said this to USA Today. "We'll never change the name," he said. "It's that simple. Never." You can use caps.
Since 1938, when the team moved from Boston to the nation's capital, Washington fans have been cheering and praising their team by singing "Hail to the Redskins." To date, there have been no extensive scientific surveys of public opinion about the nickname Redskins. But a poll done 6 months ago of 1,000 Americans nationwide found 79% in favor of keeping the name, only 11% calling for it to be changed. But you can count the number one football fan in the nation as one of those in the Change It column.
I've got to say, if I were the owner of the team, I'd think about changing it.
Some informal polls have indicated a majority of the nation's Indian people, known by the more politically correct label Native Americans, don't mind use of the name. But there are others showing growing opposition to it.
Any other ethnic group would not tolerate this kind of language being used about them that's so denigrating and dehumanizing.
The founder and first owner of the Redskins, George Preston Marshall, was an acknowledged racist. That's why his team was the last in pro football to integrate, and only after intense pressure from the federal government and the NFL's front office. It was 1961 that the team reluctantly added 4 blacks, including running back Bobby Mitchell, to its roster. Mitchell would go on to have a Hall of Fame career.
You had to worry about the people around the Redskins. And I want to defend the players. People wonder if the players were not good guys. Well, let me say it like this. 80% of them was good guys.
Over the past few decades, a number of high schools and colleges have dropped nicknames with slang-type references to Native Americans. To update where the dispute stands as of this taping, that impenetrable wall that owner Dan Snyder had seemingly built around the name Redskins is showing some cracks. After a recent meeting with the NFL Commissioner, Roger Goodell, Snyder said he's now open for more discussion about a possible name change. Now, let's see, what's that old saying? Oh yeah, it's nice to be nice. And that was certainly the case for a young lady from Concord, New Hampshire. 22-year-old Sarah Hoy-Dahl was flown across country to be on The Ellen Show about a month ago. The single mother of a 15-month-old child was working as a waitress at a Ruby Tuesdays restaurant when 2 National Guard soldiers stopped in to eat. The 2 women were talking about having to keep their order light because they'd been furloughed as a result of October's government shutdown. Sarah overheard them, and rather than give them a bill after they ate, she gave them a note.
I think we have a copy of the note, but it says, thanks to the government shutdown, people like you that protect this country are not getting paid. However, I still am. Lunch is on me. Thank you for serving, ladies. Have a good day. That's what you left.
The National Guard's women posted about the incident on Facebook, and Sarah became a kind of national sensation. On her show, Ellen repaid Sarah the $28 she spent to cover the lunches for the soldiers, then gave her a 55-inch TV. And to top things off, gave Sarah a check for $10,000. Ahead on the wrap, I'll share my thoughts on gay marriage in my 2 cents. And we'll take you to the Philippines, where the death toll keeps rising from Typhoon Haiyan. Also, you'll get a look at what's being called the most expensive weapon ever made. But first, in honor of Veterans Day, recently celebrated for the 59th time here in America, an encore performance of sorts. For those of you who may have missed it or would just love to hear it again, here's retired Navy Petty Officer Generald Wilson singing America the Beautiful at a World Series game back in October in St. Louis.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the lights from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans wide with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Wow.
Hey folks, check this out. If you're looking to save some money grocery shopping, consumer experts say do it on Wednesday. That's because it's the day when many stores start their weekly sales on selected items, and most will also honor sale prices from the previous week, meaning you have more sale items to choose from. And to save even more, the experts say Wednesday night is the ultimate time to shop and save. That's when perishable stuff is typically reduced in price for quick sale. At the Vatican in Rome, what's believed to be the mortal remains of St. Peter, leader of Jesus' 12 apostles, have just been put on public display. Pope Francis headed a special ceremony marking the start of public viewing of the 9 bone fragments. Until now, only the box holding the fragments had been on display in St. Peter's Basilica. In Brazil recently, it was like a scene out of a movie, a man actually coming back from the grave. According to local reports, a woman was visiting her family tomb in a cemetery in the city of Sao Paulo when she heard strange noises and spotted some dirt shifting around in a nearby grave. Turns out it was a man trying to dig himself out of the ground, in which he'd apparently been buried alive. Police investigators are still trying to sort this one out. And check this. A new website is becoming quite popular with women who've been cheated on. She'sAHomewrecker.com is set up for wives and girlfriends to publicly expose the women their men have cheated with. On the site, cheating victims are posting the name and photos of the homewreckers, and in some cases even the phone numbers of the other woman. The site's Facebook page has gotten nearly 250,000 likes. In news from around the globe, tens of millions of people in the Philippines are still struggling to rebuild their shattered lives nearly a month after Typhoon Haiyan. The death toll has risen now to nearly 5,700, with about 2,000 people still listed as missing. Hundreds of millions of dollars in aid from nations around the world, including the U.S., has been sent to help the Filipino deal with a host of problems. Chief among them, a lack of housing, food, and clean water for folks in areas hard hit by the November 8th typhoon. Helicopters from a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier have been flying food and supplies to some of the towns and villages which have been left cut off from the outside world. According to international aid officials, nearly 2 million people in the Philippines are still homeless as a result of Typhoon Haiyan. The torch, symbolizing the 2014 Olympic Winter Games, is back on terra firma and continuing its trek across the continent of Russia. For about a week in early November, the torch was in space, in possession of a crew of cosmonauts aboard the International Space Station. 2 of the cosmonauts took the torch on a spacewalk as part of the ceremonial relay for the upcoming Winter Games. The torch came back to Earth November 11th. Olympians from more than 50 nations will gather in the town of Sochi, Russia, February 7th through the 23rd for the Winter Olympiad. Here's another story about a Russian man. Now, he's not a cosmonaut, but a lot of folks, including yours truly, sure think he's spaced out. Let me warn you, the video I'm about to show could be upsetting, even offensive to some folks, so you might want to close your eyes on this one. A few weeks back, a Russian performance artist stripped naked in Moscow's Red Square and then nailed his testicles to a cobblestone walkway. The 29-year-old man did it to protest the Kremlin's continuing crackdown on political rights. This dude has done other crazy stunts to protest the actions of the Russian government, including sewing his lips together and wrapping his naked body in barbed wire. It's being called the most expensive weapon ever made and is named for the only U.S. president from my home state of Michigan.
I christen the United States ship Gerald R. Ford. May God bless the ship and all who sail her.
Susan Ford Bales did the honor of November 9th, formally christening the American Navy's newest aircraft carrier, named after her late father. The USS Gerald Ford is the first ship in a new class of nuclear-powered carriers. Its price tag a staggering $13 billion. But for that amount of money, the Navy is getting the biggest, fastest, most technologically advanced aircraft carrier in the world. Former President Ford, a native of Grand Rapids, was a naval officer during World War II. Work is still going on the ship, and it won't actually be put into service until 2016. In the Great Northwest, a big victory for workers at the Seattle-Tacoma Airport. A ballot measure was passed, giving them the highest minimum wage in the nation. The voter-approved Prop 1 sets a minimum wage of $15 an hour for workers in and around the so-called SeaTac airport. Fast food workers and other employees in the area held rallies for weeks prior to the election, calling attention to their struggle to get what they viewed as a living wage. The $15 an hour proposal attracted interest and campaign money from unions and business groups around the country, who believe passage of Prop 1 may have a domino effect nationwide. Coming up on the wrap, I'll give you my 2 cents on the issue of gay marriage. And later, we'll watch kids at play in Sights and Sounds. But first, it's time for a new segment here on The Wrap. We call it Just for Laughs and Words of Wisdom. This is one I've thought and prayed long and hard about. This issue of gay marriage, and in a broader sense, acceptance of homosexuality. Let me first acknowledge that I truly cannot relate to same-sex attraction. I am a very heterosexual man. And now, in the interest of full disclosure, let me say I have a brother who's gay, and from whom I've been estranged the past 4 years. Also, I was once engaged to a woman who had had a lengthy lesbian relationship. I have long been opposed to gay marriage. I have, however, always been a supporter of extending all of the legal rights of marriage to same-sex couples. The fact that the gay lobby wasn't satisfied with domestic partnership status makes it clear to me that maybe what this was really all about was power. The power of a minority to impose its will on the majority, to force recognition as completely legitimate, that which lots of good, well-meaning folks have very deep objections to.
We can be together, we can be lovey-dovey. We don't need a piece of paper to validate our love for each other. No, that's not the fight. The fight is just having equal rights.
People who are trapped in the homosexual lifestyle, they're in constant rebellion with order, with their natural order, with natural law.
A marriage should be between a man and a woman. No offense to anybody out there, but that's how I was raised, and that's
the real legitimate way to be married is a man and a woman. That's the only way that this civilization can, go any further than what it is to this day.
The Spirit of God within me leads me to believe that gay men and women have every right to be happy, to love whomever and in whatever way their hearts lead them. They deserve our loving embrace and, yes, our acceptance, not our scorn and disapproval.
We have to understand barbarians need to be educated. They need to be disciplined. And just because someone feels it or thinks it doesn't mean that we're supposed to go down that road.
I'm convinced that 50 years from now, gay marriage will be legal across America. That folks then will wonder what all the fuss was about back when gay marriage was the focus of serious debate.
We know the majority of people in Indiana, like the majority of Americans in every other state, support marriage as one man and one woman, don't we?
When do we want it? Now. What do we want? When do we want it? Now. What do we want?
But now, having said that, let me also recite the words of St. Augustine, which could be relevant. If something is wrong, even if everybody else is doing it, it's still wrong. And if something is right, even if nobody else is doing it, it's still right.
Not one civilized culture in the entire history of mankind, including those few that have been relatively tolerant of homosexuality, has ever allowed marriage between members of the same sex as norm for family life.
And so it's time to go to the Bible. There are 31,102 verses in this King James Version. About 6 of them have been widely used to condemn homosexuality and therefore same-sex marriage.
I have to go with what the Bible say. I have to. And the Bible say it's an abomination.
In the God's Torah, he states that gay lifestyle is a sin.
It's against our religion. It's not acceptable at all to be a homosexual.
It just says simple, man don't lay with another man, or a woman not with another woman.
It's in the King James Bible that homosexuality is a sin, as it is in the Catholic Bible.
Without question, the Bible is an incredible collection of books and has provided comfort, hope, and guidance to hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of people over the course of nearly 3,000 years. Strictly as a matter of faith, I guess it's okay to refer to the Bible as the Word of God. But knowing something about the history of these texts we've come to consider sacred, and about the legislative process that created the canon, what we call the Bible, I wonder if we ought really to think of this book as the literal, absolute, immutable Word of the Almighty. I believe this book provides an amazing outline for life and for living, not a blueprint.
The Bible is the Word of God through the words of human beings, speaking in the idiom of their time. And the richness of the Bible comes from the fact that we don't take it as literally so, that it was dictated by God.
In doing some of my research for this commentary, I came across a term I'd not heard of before, bibliolater, one who treats their Bible like an idol. I sense a lot of bibliolatry in the fight against same-sex marriage.
The Bible's against it, God's against it, I'm against it, and if you've got any sense, you're against it.
In Romans, it's very clear that God says it's unnatural.
God is not with you, even being a homosexual. God is not with you and being a lesbian.
Truth is, the Bible is used a lot like a food buffet, with folks choosing what they want to take literally and skipping over those things they don't.
Moses teaches in Leviticus that it is an abomination to eat shrimp. It is an abomination to eat a rabbit.
There's other law that says you shouldn't wear linen and wool together.
They are failing to read the Bible within the context of its authors and of its original culture.
To just pick out this is the one that we're going to follow, the Bible doesn't come that way. It's selective reading.
Personally, I have my doubts that God is very pleased with homosexuality. It's an aberration within the human species, not, I believe, what he intended. And yet, neither do I believe that God views same-sex coupling as an abomination, as something loathsome and sinful. A relationship bound by love and fidelity, regardless the gender mix, I believe is pleasing to God. A line written by the psychotherapist Dr. Nancy Haish strikes me as relevant. At the end of the day, I must love, I must bless, I must believe.
What I learned is that really it has to be about me. It has to be about God interfering in my life and releasing his power in my life to change my character and my destiny. Because really, I can't change anybody else.
In putting together this report on gay marriage, I've had a chance to view bits and pieces from several same-sex marriage ceremonies. The first ones I looked at made me uncomfortable. But the more I saw, the more I experienced a different sensation, a sense of acceptance, bordering on happiness for the couples involved. Their deep love for each other and the joy they got from the ceremony becoming more and more evident.
That I'ma love you forever.
You're my best friend.
You are the sun.
My companion.
The Pope saying, quote, "If someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge?"
I'm not Catholic, but I agree with Pope Francis. If those passages in the Bible condemning homosexuality do in fact reflect the true feelings of God, there will be a day of reckoning. And likewise, for those who've chosen to take those passages literally and have used them like a whip to lash gay people, there will also come judgment. For they've chosen to disregard the words of Christ, chronicled in the 27th chapter of Matthew, that after love of God, love of each other is the greatest commandment.
Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.
To my gay brothers and lesbian sisters out there, I prevail upon you to understand the depth and the sincerity of the opposition to your lifestyle. Have some appreciation for the fact that lots of wonderful people believe with all their heart that what you're doing is wrong. No question but that the tide is turning. Your side is winning this fight.
It's driven by two things: the arrival of a new generation that now makes up over 25% of adults in this country, millennials, who are very supportive. But you're also finding a lot of people of all ages who have changed their minds on this over time.
And finally, to those of you who believe homosexuality and gay marriage are wrong, it would truly make for a better world were you to be more Christ-like and embrace those you consider sinners, to be more accepting of the fact that their sexuality differs from ours, and yet, like us, they're doing what comes naturally, seeking a loving, committed, intimate relationship to provide them with companionship, happiness, and satisfaction for the rest of their lives. And so you can count me among those folks who have evolved on the issue of gay marriage. I now support the right of gay couples to be legally wed. And that is my 2 cents for this week. Still ahead on the wrap, one of the nation's leading rabbis will explain why he's dead set against interfaith marriage. Plus, we'll let you know about a big change that's coming for staff at an influential religious school. And then in Sights and Sounds, we're going to take a look at the world from a kid's perspective.
See the world for a while through the eyes of a child.
But first, here's a word from the Word.
We gotta do something about this world, y'all. I saw a woman the other day with the 2 kids in the streets, hungry, no shoes on their feet. Someone reached into my pocket and I gave her what I could. She looked at me, smiled and said, "Thank you, brother, in the name of Jesus." loving everyone. Show us love, how to love the neighbor. Sing a song from self-destruction. Oh, why can't we live in a world of peace? Jesus, show us the way. I'm asking in the name of Jesus. Kingdom come, thy will be done. Yeah, you better listen to the things I'm about to say. What's falling from the sky? Never know what's falling down. And give no reason why. It's hard to sleep. You see, it's hard for the kids to sleep when they don't get enough to eat. You see, we gotta stop all this killing. Afraid over the land. A helping hand. If we get a chance, come on, everybody now. Can you show us how to save the world? Nobody wants to take the blame, but you know heaven put to shame.
At least on the surface, this one seems to be a classic case of religious intolerance and discrimination. A nationally renowned rabbi says he will no longer preside over interfaith wedding ceremonies. The head of the Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, Rabbi David Wolpe, says interfaith marriage threatens the future viability of America's Jewish community.
Judaism is a small group of people. There are about 14 or 15 million Jews in the world. We're less than 1 or 2% of the American population. And so one of the things that we worry about is if people marry non-Jews, because the likelihood is that their children will be raised in the majority culture, that Jews and Judaism will disappear.
Well, despite having a position which is clearly bigoted, Wolpe says he urges Jews to only date and marry other followers of the Jewish faith. A survey conducted earlier this year found that 58% of all Jewish Americans are married to non-Jews. And among non-Orthodox Jews, the interfaith marriage rate is nearly 80%. At one of the nation's best-known religious schools, if you got them, you can now go ahead and smoke them. Plus, you can also have a beer or a cocktail. The Chicago-based Moody Bible Institute has decided to reverse a policy in place since 1886. It required employees of the school to refrain from using tobacco and alcohol. Moody officials stress the policy change only applies to employees, not students. And Institute staff can't smoke or drink on campus or in front of any students. A study of Protestant pastors done a few years back found an overwhelming majority interpret Scripture as forbidding Christians from getting drunk, but not from using alcohol. In Matthew 15:11, Jesus said it's not what goes in a man's mouth that makes him unclean, but rather what comes out of it. Well, it's not the mouth, but the eyes, which are the focus of this week's Sights and Sounds segment. We're going to take you to the park to watch kids at play, and we'll listen to an incredibly beautiful song from the year 2000 flick, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
When you're feeling like you're out of touch, all alone and lost and drifting through the night, just think back to younger times and you'll find the light. See the world for a while through the eyes of a child. You will see so much wonder in your day. All that you or try to see yourself above the clouds. Spread your wings and fly. See the world for a while through the eyes of a child. You will see so much wonder in your days. All that you believed when you were small are still the dreams you carry on. Imagine what could be if you just believed in you. When you were young, who did you wanna be? What is stopping you from that dream? Oh, this is who you are. Don't be afraid. The child in you will never fade. The power to believe is yours alone. No one could ever take that child through the eyes of a child. You will see so much wonder in your gaze. And all that you believed when you were small are still the dreams that guide us all. Ooh, the mirror shows you wrong, but reflects the child in you. If there's one thing I could say to you, it would be to try to make your dream come true. You can do almost anything if you just believe. If you just believe. If only you believe. Bye.